is CNN Breaking News.
Robert Mueller's team is preparing to interview President Trump's private lawyers, but it's also been forced to defend itself against new attacks from members of the Trump transition team, Republican lawyers, and the conservative media.
At issue here is tens of thousands of emails sent by members of the transition team. The transition team's lawyers say Mueller got those emails illegally and argue that the documents should have been protected.
But the special counsel's office says it has followed the proper legal channels, and legal experts say the emails are fair game because they were sent from government accounts. CNN's Boris Sanchez explains how this latest round of attacks will affect the investigation moving forward.
This story just adds another layer on what has been a barrage of attacks on the special counsel from Republicans, some Republicans who are making the case that Robert Mueller should resign after news broke several days ago that there had been messages exchanged between top FBI officials back in 2016 during the campaign that were critical of then candidate Donald Trump. Republicans made the case that those two officials that had since been on the special counsel team had tainted the investigation, so to speak. One of those officials actually left the special counsel before the text messages were revealed. One of them was reassigned shortly after those messages came to light. But again, many Republicans are making the case that the messages reveal partisanship within the investigation, and they've argued that Robert Mueller should resign. Democrats, in response, have made the case that the special counsel is not partisan, that it remains politically independent, though they are speculating that the president is now planning to fire Robert Mueller. Two Democrats, both on the House Intelligence Committee, made the case this weekend that that was the case. First, Adam Schiff, who was on Twitter saying that he believed that the firing of Robert Mueller would happen before the end of the year. The other, Jackie Spear, also made the case to a San Francisco TV station that Robert Mueller's firing was imminent. CNN reached out to White House attorney Ty Cobb for a statement on these remarks, and he gave us a statement writing in part, quote, "As the White House has consistently said for months, there is no consideration of firing the special counsel." So you have the White House denying that there is any kind of plan to remove Robert Mueller as the head of the special counsel. You have some Democrats that are saying that that is the case, that his firing is imminent. And then you have certain Republicans that are saying that the special counsel is tainted and that Robert Mueller should indeed resign. A complicated situation, and one that likely will receive greater focus because as early as this week, you have a White House legal team meeting with Robert Mueller one-on-one, potentially to discuss the next steps in this investigation. Boris Sanchez, CNN at the White House.
All right, here now, CNN political commentators Errol Lewis and Andre Bauer, and CNN political analyst Julian Zelizer as well. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so let's start here with the claim that these emails, tens of thousands of documents, were unlawfully produced by the GSA. Julian, these are government accounts, right?
Yeah, it seems from the stories that the GSA voluntarily shared the information with the investigators. So at this moment, there's no reason to suspect anything wrong was done. I see this as part of a broader attack from the administration on the legitimacy of the investigation.
So let me come to you, Andre, and I want to read for you a tweet from Norm Eisen, the former ethics czar for the Obama White House. And he also was, as he writes here in this tweet, the deputy general counsel of a transition, Obama-Biden 08. I warned everyone there is no expectation of privacy in your transition emails. The clue, emails are name@ptt.gov. The whining letter from the Trump transition tactically admits this. It ends by asking for a legislative fix. You've been part of a transition to the executive branch when you were the lieutenant governor under Mark Sanford in South Carolina. You knew that your emails were government property, did you not? And if there was some investigation, they could be retrieved through a government agency, correct?
I did. But I would say this, Victor. What the American people want to have is they want to feel like there is a conflict of interest-free investigation. And if people aren't going through the right channels to do that, then people say, well, you know, there's already so much of a cloud over this. It looks like most of the people investigated donated to either President Obama or Secretary
Well, hold
Clinton.
on. I want to give you time to finish this answer, but for the scope
Okay.
of this letter that went from the attorney for Trump for America to these congressional committees, you acknowledge that these documents were not unlawfully obtained, correct? And that
Well, I don't because I don't know the particulars of how they were obtained. I'm sure they can go through a legal channel to obtain them through the correct manner, and that may be what they should have done.
Are you suggesting that they didn't? I mean, if you say if that's
Well,
what they should have done, then you're suggesting that maybe they did not.
Well, Victor, I don't know the particulars of
Okay.
it. What I'm more of the big picture is look, they're fair game. They may be a different channel by which they need to obtain these. But overall, what people, well, certainly not everybody, but a lot of people feel like this is a one-sided investigation. Why isn't Hillary being investigated to her ties as Russia as well? Because you don't just, in NASCAR, for example, you don't just inspect
This ain't
the winner.
NASCAR, Andre. It ain't NASCAR.
Just
This is a
inspect-
federal investigation, and you've got a prosecutor here who's going through a government service agency, that office, administration rather, to get the documents.
But Victor, you don't think that Hillary Clinton should be investigated too with her ties to Russia?
Andre,
I mean, the fact that she got hundreds of millions of dollars from Russians and now she gets nothing?
you knew the exact topic we invited you here to discuss. It was this letter from Trump for America to the congressional committees, and every time you're on, you transition it back to Hillary Clinton.
Because
Hillary Clinton is
the
not the
question
president of the
is
United States, and right now she's not under federal investigation. That's what we're talking about this morning. Errol, let me come to
asked
you.
me about investigation, and I tell you that a conflict of interest investigation includes everything on the table, not just a one-sided investigation.
Okay, so Errol, let me come to you. And this is what we're hearing from conservative media, and we'll have this conversation with Brian Stelter a little later. This echo chamber from the White House to, most often, the studios of Fox News in New York, back and forth, and conservative media broadly trying to continue to discredit the Mueller investigation by trying to discredit the investigators, but also to shut it all down together.
Well, that's right. Part of what seems to be a transparent effort to sort of undermine the investigation by making it seem as if, well, there's some sort of conflict. Something wasn't done right. The people may have actually given a political donation at some point in their life, and on and on and on. I mean, in this particular case, it's important to keep in mind that what's being offered here is that perhaps the transition materials were improperly given to the Mueller investigation, and they're saying it's protected by attorney-client privilege. One thing to keep in mind, and it's very rare to hear the special counsel actually explain any of this, but they said, look, we did everything pursuant to the permission of the writers of the emails or pursuant to criminal process, which to my ear sounds like what they're saying is you don't have you can't assert attorney-client privilege to do something that is unlawful. That defeats the privilege. So if you say, if I were to say to you, Victor, you're my lawyer, I plan to do something illegal, why don't you help me figure out how to do it? You can't run back later and say, this is all protected by attorney-client privilege. So, at some point we should really talk about the truth, not the politics of the situation, not whether or not Hillary Clinton got a pass 2 years ago or anything like that. We should really talk about the facts of the matter, and that's what we should all be waiting for the special counsel to reveal to us.
Julian, I want to talk. Hold on, Andre. We're going to come back to you. I'll get back to Julian, and I'll come right back to you after that. We're going in order here. There was a response here from a spokesman for the special counsel, which is very rare to hear from him. He's not responded to any of the criticism thus far. Let's put up on the screen what Mr. Carr said. When we have obtained emails in the course of our ongoing criminal investigation, we have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process. They're defending how they got these emails. Just to give us some context here on the rarity of hearing from a spokesman for Special Counsel Mueller.
Yeah, we haven't heard much from him at all. He's been very careful to remain quiet, not to have his spokesman out front. In part, this is because Mueller is extraordinarily cautious, actually, in how he conducts investigations. It's the opposite of what administration spokespeople tend to be saying right now. But I think that the special counsel feels that his office right now is under systematic attack, which it is. And so my guess is this is an effort in a very important week, probably, in terms of how the administration is going to handle this investigation to explain clearly that nothing wrong was done on their part. They don't believe that this is protected material, and they went through the proper channels to obtain the material. As Errol said, this is a very transparent effort. That's why all of a sudden we're talking about Hillary Clinton right now in the panel. And so I think the special counsel feels that they have to be a little political right now, meaning not political for one side or the other, but to protect the integrity of the investigation from the President of the United States and his allies.
Andre, do you think Special Counsel Mueller should be fired?
No, but I do think that it is more than fair to raise questions about people who are on his team that have only donated to one side, that have been involved in Fusion GPS, whose wives have been paid for them. All those are conflicts of interest. And all those are important when building the trust of the American people, because the whole reason you have special counsel is to make sure there are no conflicts of interest, and they're all over the place in this investigation.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Tonight, though, we are keeping them honest with new reporting of what seems to be an alternate reality for the president, a reality where he sees no security threat of Russian election meddling, no political threat from Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. In fact, no R word altogether inside the White House at times, because some aides are reportedly scared to bring it up, which wouldn't matter except for the fact that intelligence officials say there is every reason to believe the Russians will try to do this again. The president is telling friends he's expecting something of a Christmas miracle in the Russia probe. This is according to new exclusive reporting from CNN's Sarah Murray, Jeremy Diamond, and Manu Raju. According to multiple sources, the president is insisting not only that he's going to be exonerated and soon, but also that special counsel Robert Mueller is going to write a letter clearing him of any wrongdoing that he can wave around as proof that he didn't do anything wrong. A Christmas miracle. Now, keeping them honest, there's no indication from Mueller or his team that they believe in miracles or that the investigation is in its final stages. Only Mueller and his team know for sure, but some legal experts say the investigation might actually be ramping up with Michael Flynn's guilty plea and cooperation. As to the best Christmas card ever, this magical letter of exoneration, it's unclear where that idea even comes from. The real problem, though, according to one source, is that if the president doesn't get what he wants for Christmas or soon thereafter, if this letter doesn't come, that he will have some kind of meltdown. That is a direct quote from a source in the piece. A longtime friend of the president says he thinks his attorneys have lulled him into a false sense of security and unrealistic expectations, which could backfire spectacularly, but have now made the president less agitated. Take a look at what the president said yesterday about tens of thousands of Trump transition team emails that Mueller's team had obtained, the president's lawyers say unlawfully, which Mueller's team denies.
Not looking good. It's not looking good. It's quite sad to see that. So my people were very upset about it. I can't imagine there's anything on them, frankly, because as we said, there's no collusion. There's no collusion whatsoever. But a lot of lawyers thought that was pretty sad.
Do you still be integrity firing?
No, I'm not.
We'll have more on those emails later in the program, but as to the last part, not planning to fire Mueller, one source predicts if the president doesn't get this exoneration letter, again, a letter that seems to exist only in his own mind, that he will fire Mueller, which would leave him vulnerable to impeachment. On Friday, the president said lawmakers need to get back to running the country.
Let's put it this way. There is absolutely no collusion. That has been proven.
Keeping them honest, that hasn't been proven. It might be eventually, but it hasn't been proven yet. The Mueller investigation is not over, no matter how many times the president repeats himself. The fact is, it's not over, and we know the president likes to repeat himself on this issue.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics.
Russia is a ruse. There is no collusion. You know why? Because I don't speak to Russians. This Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. The entire thing has been a witch hunt. Look, there has been no obstruction. There has been no collusion.
All I can tell you is this. There was no collusion. There was no nothing.
Here is more of what the president said Friday.
Let's put it this way. There is absolutely no collusion. That has been proven. When you look at the committees, whether it's the Senate or the House, everybody, my worst enemies, They walk out, they say, there is no collusion, but we'll continue to look.
Now, on those congressional investigations, the new reporting from Sarah Murray, Manu Raju, and Jeremy Diamond is that several members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees have made a conscious effort to avoid the president and the White House to guard against allegations of impropriety. Meanwhile, other lawmakers are avoiding discussing Russia with the president. Sources say in a call with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in August, the president railed about the ongoing investigations, and the two have steered clear of the topic since then. Senator Lindsey Graham says he tries to avoid talking Russia on the golf course with the president because the president will just complain about it and say he didn't do anything wrong. Now, this all tracks with what the Washington Post reported last week, that the president's daily briefing is structured in a way to avoid upsetting him, because if anyone brings up Russia, it takes it off the rails. So there are people around the president telling him what he wants to hear, others not bringing up the country that attacked American democracy because it will make him mad. And he has yet to even have one cabinet-level meeting on Russian interference or what to do about it. And now that the president is expecting a letter of exoneration from Mueller to come soon, it may have created an artificial calm with some of those around him concerned about an impending storm. Much like a letter, we'll keep you posted.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We begin tonight with the president saying today that the Russia investigations are a form of mania cooked up by President Trump's opponents in an effort to undermine him. But it wasn't President Trump who said that. It was Russian President Vladimir Putin in his annual end-of-the-year press conference in Moscow. Putin praised President Trump, saying he has made a number of fairly serious achievements, and Putin called the Russia investigations delirium and madness.
This is all dreamed up by people who are in opposition to Trump, so as to make sure that everybody thinks that what he's doing, what he's working at, is illegitimate.
As you know, United States intelligence agencies are unanimous in this conclusion that Russia launched an unprecedented attack on the American electoral process during the 2016 presidential campaign and are almost certainly going to try to do it again. A clear threat to national security and American democracy, something the leader of a country under attack surely would want to address. But tonight there's new reporting from the Washington Post that says not only does President Trump continue to reject evidence of Russia meddling to support him, he doesn't even want to hear about it. According to the Washington Post, current and former officials say the president's daily brief is, quote, often structured to avoid upsetting him with intelligence related to Russia, sometimes just in the written assessment not brought up in the room. One former senior intelligence official told the Post that if you talk about Russia's meddling, it takes the briefing off the rails. Now, consider the implications of that for just a second. The people who briefed the President of the United States about a direct attack on this country have to be careful about what they say about the country that did it, because it will upset President Trump. Now, again, the meddling in this election isn't some conspiracy theory. All of the U.S. intelligence agencies say that it happened. So considering that and this new Washington Post reporting, it is worth looking again at what President Trump said to reporters last month after meeting with Putin. Quote, I just asked him again. He said he absolutely did not meddle in our election. He did not do what they are saying he did. He also said, every time he sees me, he says, I didn't do that. And I really believe that when he tells me that. He means it. But he says, I didn't do that. I think he's very insulted by it, if you want to know the truth. Now, one could take that as the President of the United States being more concerned with the feelings of Russia's president than the integrity of his own country's elections. But it's kind of a challenge to get a read on what the president meant, because listen to what he said the very next day. Now, keep in mind that this comment came, his first comment set off a firestorm of controversy. So this next comment came after that and has more than a whiff of damage control.
I believe that he feels that he and Russia did not meddle in the election. As to whether I believe it or not, I'm with our agencies, especially as currently constituted with their leadership. I believe in our intel agencies, our intelligence agencies. I've worked with them very strongly.
So, to be fair, that last statement does sort of track with what he said just about a year ago, just after he was elected, but with a caveat. First, here's that statement.
As far as hacking, I think it was Russia, but I think we also get hacked by other countries and other people.
Well, the new reporting in the Washington Post says the president immediately regretted saying what you just heard him say. His inner circle, according to the Post reporting, had been pleading with him to acknowledge Russia's interference in the election. But after he said that, January 11th, he reportedly told aides, quote, it's not me, it wasn't right. In May, intelligence leaders testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee.
As the assembled leadership of the intelligence community. Do you believe that the January 2017 intelligence community assessment accurately characterized the extent of Russian activities in the 2016 election and its conclusion that Russian intelligence agencies were responsible for the hacking and leaking of information and using misinformation in order to influence our elections? Simple yes or no would suffice.
I do. Yes, sir.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yes.
It's been 7 months since those 6 yeses. Administration officials tell the Washington Post the president has never convened a cabinet meeting about Russian interference or what to do about it. Never. Not once. One former high-ranking Trump administration official tells the Post there's an unspoken understanding of the National Security Council not to raise the issue because that would acknowledge its validity, which the president would take as an affront. Keeping him honest, a threat to national security should trump one man's feelings, even if, especially if, that man is the President of the United States.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We begin tonight, keeping him honest, with the president for the first time leaving open the possibility of pardoning the first person inside his administration to be charged in the special counsel's Russia investigation. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, as you know, pleaded guilty of lying to the FBI about conversations with Russia's ambassador. He's now cooperating with Robert Mueller's investigation. Today on the White House South Lawn, the president was asked whether he would consider pardoning Flynn. Here's what he said.
I don't want to talk about pardons for Michael Flynn yet. We'll see what happens. Let's see.
We'll see, let's see, is among the president's favorite phrase. A vague cliffhanger he's used to talk about the fate of everything from the Paris Climate Accord to war with North Korea. Now, we'll see could suggest there is consideration being given to pardoning Michael Flynn. We'll see could be a message to Flynn that no matter what Mueller threatens him with, he can still be bailed out. It's the first time the president has opened the door to the possibility of pardon, which of course set off a lot of alarm bells, though attempting to tamp the whole thing down. White House attorney Ty Cobb said this in a statement a bit later after the president's remarks. Quote, there is no consideration being given to pardoning Michael Flynn at the White House. That's what we call a walk back, and it's in keeping with what Sarah Sanders said about whether a Flynn pardon was on the table 10 days ago.
Would he consider pardoning him?
I'm not aware of that has come up or any process or decision on that front.
So that's, you haven't talked to him about it, or
no? I haven't asked. I haven't asked the president whether or not he would do that. I think before we start discussing the pardons for individuals, we should see, what happens in specific cases too.
So is it fair to say it's on the table?
No, I just said I haven't had the conversation with him because I don't feel that it's necessary until you get further down the road and determine whether or not that's even something needed.
As I said, that's pretty close to Ty Cobb's statement that a pardon isn't something being considered. Now, either the president is saying something that's not true, or it's true and he hasn't told some of his closest advisors about it, or maybe those advisors know it's being considered by him and they're not telling the truth in their statements. None of those are great options, at least if you're one of those people interested in getting the facts. But frankly, the mixed messaging on things like this from the White House, it's not anything new. Let's go back to the firing of FBI Director James Comey. Here's what the president said in April.
Is it too late now to ask him to step down?
No, it's not too late, but, I have confidence in him. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Less than a month later, on May 9th, then Press Secretary Sean Spicer had this exchange at the press briefing.
Does the president still have full confidence in FBI Director James Comey?
I have no reason to believe. I haven't asked him. So I have not asked the president since the last time we spoke about this.
And the last time you spoke about it, you said he did have confidence, but you're not sure to say that again now?
Well, I don't, in light of what you're telling me, I don't want to start speaking on behalf of the president without speaking to him first.
Now, that was a good call because Comey was fired hours after that press briefing. Steve Bannon also got a we'll see from the president. In August, the president was asked if he still had confidence in Bannon.
Well, we'll see. And look, I like Mr. Bannon. He's a friend of mine. But Mr. Bannon came on very late. You know that. I went through 17 senators, governors, and I won all the primaries. Mr. Bannon came on very much later than that. And I like him. He's a good man. He is not a racist. I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon.
We'll see what happens. Bannon, by the way, was out 3 days later, but his fingerprints, of course, remain, and he figures into the president's remarks today in other ways as well. A super PAC aligned with him, a group called Great America Alliance, has been running an ad in local cable markets calling for members of Robert Mueller's team to be fired. The ad features a Fox News commentator, and it fits right in with the campaign Fox News has been on to try to discredit the Mueller investigation, a campaign that the president is, of course, fully on board with. Here's a longer version of what the president said about Flynn today.
I don't want to talk about pardons for Michael Flynn yet. We'll see what happens. Let's see. I can say this. When you look at what's gone on with the FBI and with the Justice Department, people are very, very angry.
Now, one could assume that the very, very angry people the president is talking about are himself, Sean Hannity, and other Fox News anchors who've been on a campaign against the Mueller investigation, which is fine. The president can watch whatever TV programs he wants. But he probably should also be getting intelligence briefings about Russia's interference in the election, or perhaps holding a cabinet meeting or two about that interference. And the recent reporting in the Washington Post says that doesn't happen, because if someone tries to talk about that particular attack on American democracy, it upsets the president and takes the briefing off the rails. So just think about that for a moment. The daily briefings are structured to avoid upsetting a president who deems anything that he doesn't like fake news and anything Russia-related an effort to delegitimize him. Nothing, it seems, can break his feedback loop with Fox News talking points. Certainly not intelligence he refuses to hear and facts he refuses to accept.
Full-throated pushback in the Russia investigation, attacks on special counsel Mueller, attacks on the FBI and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Now add the president's eldest son and namesake to that list, Donald Trump Jr. This evening in West Palm Beach, referring to those FBI personal texts, the Steele dossier, and slamming what he seems to think is a double standard where his father is concerned.
Imagine what would happen if we roll back the clock to 2008 and a conservative director of the FBI and high-up people in the FBI that were leading all these investigations wrote an email about in an insurance policy, the dossier, in the unlikely event that Barack Obama was elected president. What do you think would happen? Do you think the media would cover that? Yeah. Do you think it would be brushed under the rug like, oh, it's nothing, it doesn't mean anything? There'd be revolution in the streets. So I'm glad that this is coming out now, because it is good, because real people have to see this. You know, my father talked about a rigged system throughout the campaign, and people are, oh, what are you talking about? But it is, and you're seeing it. There is, and there are people at the highest levels of government that don't want to let America be America.
People who don't want to let America be America. Joining us now, Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. What's your reaction to what Donald Trump Jr. just said?
Well, he apparently forgets the fact that in real time what happened last year was the director of the FBI talked about an investigation into Hillary Clinton even 10 days or less before an election, but did not tell the country that there was also an investigation going on of the Trump campaign over a far more serious matter. That is whether individuals of the Trump campaign had been suborned essentially as agents of a foreign power. So for the most consequential difference between how these investigations were handled, it cut very much in Donald Trump's favor. And that seems to be something that Donald Trump Jr. would rather ignore.
He says there are people who don't want to let America be America, suggesting there's some kind of conspiracy, perhaps, to undermine his father's administration. Is there any conspiracy like that?
No, but you have to realize this is, I guess, a Trump family characteristic, and that is to always view themselves as the victim of something, victim of a rigged system, victim of an unfair FBI, victim of unfair press coverage. This seems to be a genetic trait. But the reality is that I think our FBI and our Department of Justice have a lot of really dedicated public servants whose work is being maligned right now because there's an effort to tear down those institutions, to tear down what Bob Mueller may find, to discredit it in advance by casting doubt on the integrity of these institutions. In the meantime, of course, they do enormous damage to our democracy and undermine public confidence in the administration of justice.
Trying to undermine Robert Mueller's investigation. There are questions that you've raised about whether the Republicans, in a way, trying to undermine what's going on, even in the House Intelligence Committee. You have an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today where you say you've made progress, but you also say Republican members have posed challenges. Explain that.
Well, there are a number of steps the Republicans are taking which don't make sense from an investigative point of view, and they're a departure from how we have operated in the past. Probably the most graphic example, they've scheduled key interviews out of state, including one tomorrow, when we have another vote on the tax bill, and we have a vote potentially tomorrow to keep the government open. So why would they be scheduling interviews out of state if they simply didn't want us to be present during the interviews? Now, these are interviews with witnesses that we've been asking them to bring in for months, and they've sat on. So what is the headlong rush to do it now, if not to try to end the investigation? And that's my fear. We saw on display in the Judiciary Committee last week an effort to discredit Mueller, discredit the FBI, discredit the Justice Department, to shut down Mueller. We're seeing in our committee, in the Intelligence Committee, an effort to bring the congressional investigation to a premature conclusion, and that ought to concern all Americans who want to get to the truth.
Is this something that either the chairman of the committee, Devin Nunes, who I know isn't involved with the Russia investigation, or Mike Conaway, who is running the Russia investigation for a committee, have either of them said to you that they are trying to shut this down soon?
Well, they've been, I think, fairly vague when I ask, why are we scheduling witnesses 3 a day when it took months for you to schedule some of the witnesses we've asked for a long time ago? Why don't we have these witnesses that you're scheduling out of state come before our committee after the holidays? Why are we not scheduling any interviews for the new year when there are dozens of interviews to be scheduled? I can't get an answer, and that tells me that there may very well be marching orders from the top that they got to bring this to an end. And we have seen Steve Bannon, the president, and others amp up the heat on Congress to shut us down. Now, the Republican senators have acknowledged the president weighed in with them to try to get them to shut down their investigation. The House members have not been willing to comment about whether they've received similar pressure from the White House, but they certainly seem to be acting that way.
They're acting like they're being pressured from the White House. I want to play you something that we heard from the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Obviously, the entire Russia investigation, at its core, is a question about whether Russia tried to influence the election, whether Russia has undue influence on the Trump campaign and maybe at the beginning stages of the Trump presidency. This is what DNI Clapper, former DNI Clapper, said about phone calls between Vladimir Putin and President Trump over the weekend.
I think this past weekend is illustrative of what a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
Do you think President Trump is an asset to Vladimir Putin? He's treating him like some kind of intelligence asset?
Well, I think the president is allowing himself to be manipulated by Putin. Putin knows, because the Kremlin does a psychological profile, I'm sure, of world leaders, what the president's strengths and weaknesses are, and knows, because this is sort of in plain sight, that flattery will get you just about everything with this president. And so in his year-end comments, Vladimir Putin talks about how great the American economy is. And why are some people in the United States questioning the legitimacy of his election when, of course, the Russians would never interfere in our affairs? These are talking points that could have been written by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But the president of Russia, Putin, understands how to push this president's buttons, how to get this president to do effectively his bidding, and praise is the way to do it. And so in that respect, it is a bit like the relationship between a case officer and asset. You need to know the motivations of your asset, what will get the asset to do the things you want. I wouldn't push that analogy too far, but the reality is I think Putin is using all of the tactics you would expect him to use. The only surprising thing is how well they seem to work with the president.
Congressman Adam Schiff, we know you have an unexpected tax vote tomorrow morning, so we'll let you go and get some sleep here. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, speaking of buttons and pushing and presidential psychology, today on Twitter, the president took on the Washington Post with another claim of fake news. The report in question that the president considered putting Neil Gorsuch's nomination to the Supreme Court over his private criticisms of the president's attack on the judiciary. I'll talk this over with Maggie Haberman next. So this morning, the president tweeted yet again that a story he didn't like in the Washington Post was fake news. This is the tweet in question. He says, a story in the Washington Post that I was close to rescinding the nomination of Justice Gorsuch prior to confirmation is fake news. I never even wavered, and I'm very proud of him and the job he is doing as a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. The unnamed sources don't exist. Well, the Washington Post reported the president was so angry with Neil Gorsuch after he privately criticized the president's attacks on the judiciary that he considered withdrawing the nomination altogether. The report said he was venting angrily, the president was, to advisors, worrying that Gorsuch would not be, quote, loyal. That's the key word here. CNN political analyst, New York Times White House correspondent Maggie Haberman joins me right now. And Maggie, that's the bigger issue here. We know that loyalty is something that is of the utmost importance to this president.
Right. Look, I mean, especially to the issue of his tweet that the sources don't exist. I've worked with two of these reporters. I'm confident the sources exist. Right. And this is often what he says is people aren't actually real. Look, this is, as you say, on its own, we knew at the time that he was unhappy with what Neil Gorsuch had said and what leaked out about what he had said. We knew the president was frustrated. This takes it a tick further, but I think your point that there is a larger issue of how the president views relationships, right? Everything is sort of this one-way street of loyalty toward him. I mean, the way he views loyalty isn't even that, he'll be loyal back because he gets rid of people all the time. It's that he expects people to pay some sort of unending price if he gives them something. And this is where he conflates himself with the institution he serves. Making an appointment for a Supreme Court justice is certainly something that I suspect justices feel gratitude toward the president who does it. But it is not supposed to be something where you have some personal fealty. He was actually preserving the institution, Neil Gorsuch, by saying what he said. And the president just can't see it that way. We heard this word loyalty come up repeatedly in the campaign. We've heard it come up repeatedly in the presidency. My colleagues and I heard about it when the president was looking for a replacement for James Comey, the fired FBI director. He asked people about potential replacements. Will this person be loyal? That was the word. He clearly views Jeff Sessions' recusal, the attorney general from the Russia-related probes, as disloyal to him. He described it as unfair to the president in an interview with me and my colleagues over the summer. But this is the continuum on which this all exists.
It's curious to me, though, because if Jeff Sessions is not loyal enough, James Comey obviously wasn't and got fired. But Rex Tillerson reportedly called him a moron. Right? Gary Cohn criticized him quite publicly for the Charlottesville speech. I don't consider those to be acts of blind loyalty necessarily, yet those guys are still around.
Well, I think let's get together again in February and see if those guys are still around. I mean, in all seriousness, look, the relationship with Tillerson has never been good, or at least it was good very early on for a limited amount of time, and then I think it was not very good. The relationship with Gary Cohn has never repaired, and did Gary Cohn get the job that he wanted, which was the Fed chair? He did not. So, I mean, I just think that these things have some nuance and gradation. I think it was important to John Kelly, the chief of staff, to keep a continuum of top advisors in cabinet positions filled through the first year. I think that once we get past the first year, you will see some change. I think the president is aware that he can't just get rid of everybody. And again, to be clear, he didn't pull back the nomination of Neil Gorsuch.
Correct.
He vented about it to somebody. He vents all the time about all manner of things. Part of this, the asking people questions about whether he should have done something, sometimes it's venting, sometimes it's just how he processes something. Sometimes he actually is thinking of undoing what he did, and you almost never know exactly what he's thinking.
Which is why you get all the kinds of rumors that have been going around for months about Robert Mueller and whatnot.
Correct.
These discussions may very well be happening.
Correct.
They may not mean, going to the full extent on them or not. We are at a key point in this presidency right now. It's almost the end of 2017. He's going to get this tax bill through. He will sign his first major piece of legislation. And one could reasonably ask the question, well, is this a pivot point? Is this a chance for the president to change how he behaves?
I mean, we've had so many pivot points that we've gone in circles, right? I mean, he's not going to change how he behaves. I think that we have that. Let me rephrase that. I think it's very, very unlikely that he is going to change how he behaves. I cannot see this being what gets it done. If anything, he takes things that are perceived victories for him as confirmation that his approach worked. So I don't see why he would change how he's doing things from this. This bill, we've got to be really clear about this. The main reason this bill got done, I realize that there are a lot of victory laps being taken by various people at the White House, and to be sure, the president should feel happy that this is major legislation that got through. Whether it's a problem for Republicans down the road, I don't know. But Republicans on Capitol Hill acted out of essentially fear and self-preservation. They needed to have something done so they could go into the midterms saying, look what we did. That's the main reason this got done.
Because the president, in some ways, is away. They need something independent of him, even though he needs to sign it. One of the things we often see before the end of the year is a news conference, right? It's very possible the president will answer questions before the press in a very public way. This could be interesting this time. I mean, there's a whole lot of Russia to ask about. There's a whole lot of Roy Moore you could ask about. There's a whole lot of sexual harassment stuff to ask about here. I'm very curious to see how he handles that.
I think that he will probably, if he does do it, I think that he will probably handle it the way we have seen him handle similar lengthy news conferences. Remember, there was that one that he did very early on against his aide's advice, where he took questions for almost an hour. He loved it. It felt to him like a venting session. I think some of what he does here will depend on where things are with this investigation and how much he is buying into the strategy that his legal advisors have prescribed at this point.
Maggie Haberman, great to see you. You just set a date. We have to get back together in February to talk about who's still
and not a
in the
moment
administration.
before then. That's when we'll do it.
Fine. We're taking a break, Maggie and me. Thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it. Up next, new details in that deadly train derailment in Washington State. Today, we now know how much the train was speeding when it hit that curve, but there are still many safety questions that don't have answers. That's the latest next.